for the Dalek invasion of Earth is radiation nil, oxygen normal, pressure normal, yet London is deserted, with no signs of life and no sense of normality. Exploring the decaying city sometime after 2164 AD, the Doctor and his companions soon learn that it is not as empty as it seems. The Daleks, far from having been destroyed on Skaro, have conquered the world. Nearly wiped out by storm and plague, the Earth's population has been commandeered by the Daleks into huge mining operations. Some humans have suffered the further indignity of being transformed into Robomen to serve the Daleks in their diabolical plans. Humanity's only hope for survival lies with a small band of resistance fighters who need all the help they can get. To start out with, this serial had a great story. It was well written and executed. The Daleks were creepy, and it was scary seeing the Daleks at landmarks throughout London. The idea of the Robomen was neat, for when you think about it, the Daleks can't do everything. I mean, they can't do everything, and therefore need servants to help them, and thus they take humans and turn them into these humans with these robotic attachments that's put on them so they can be controlled. I thought it was a good idea, and was pretty interesting to see humans being attacked by their own kind. The members of the Resistance had some interesting characters and storylines. The one member of the group, David, is a fighter whom has a love story with Susan. This to me seemed to just come out of nowhere, and just happened, and did not ease into a love relationship. But it was a necessary device for the end of the serial for Susan's departure, but I will get to that later. The overall reason why the Daleks invaded Earth was to dig up the planet's core and replace the core with a propulsion system to fly the planet to other systems and invade them. To me, this seemed like a cheap and disappointing reason for the Daleks to be on Earth. If it was for another reason, like, say, enslavement of the human race until they exterminate them, then we would have a valid reason for the Daleks being on Earth. This serial was the second Doctor Who story to intercut videotape recordings in the studio with pre-filmed scenes that were filmed using film on location in London. And this went seamlessly and gave new life to Doctor Who. Suddenly the show seemed more open and not so condensed and cramped like a stage play filmed on set like previous episodes, and gave a bigger impact on certain scenes like when we see Daleks at landmarks throughout London. The other serial to use this before was The Reign of Terror, but only used it for one scene. This serial marked the first time a companion left the TARDIS and the Doctor. In the final scene of the serial, one can see that Susan wants to stay with David but does not want to leave her grandfather. The Doctor has difficulty telling her to stay, and so holds her one last time and enters the TARDIS. Susan talks to David and just cannot decide. She doesn't want to choose between them, so the Doctor chooses for her. He double locks the doors and tells her she is better off staying with David than, as he says it, looking after an old buffer like me. He then says the now famous speech, "One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs, and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine." He then takes a sad, deep breath and says his goodbyes and operates the controls. The TARDIS vanishes before Susan as she is left alone with David. At the spot where the TARDIS was, Susan leaves her key where the TARDIS was, and walks away with David. First off, we all have to admit this: they just left Susan. They abandoned her. She is left alone with someone she doesn't even know to help rebuild the world and start civilization over again. What kind of life is that for a teenage girl? How can she help? What can she do? And how can she really know she loves David? Of course, then the same could be said about Bella with Jacob and Edward in Twilight, but that's for another time in review. But one can say that this farewell wasn't entirely good for Susan. But it was still a sad moment, and one does feel like crying when they see it, and I will admit it was well executed. And you can just see the heartbreak the Doctor feels as he says goodbye. There's just so much pain in his face. I would have to give this serial 4.5 stars. Even though a companion has left the Doctor, a new one will come that will fill the hole in his two hearts that would help him get over Susan. And that companion will be introduced in the next serial, entitled The Rescue.